What haunts a legend when the spotlight fades? When the final bow is taken and silence replaces applause? For Robert Redford at 89, it wasn't the Oscars gathering dust or the millions earned. It was 7 faces burned into his soul. 7 women whose love, loss, and longing shaped the man behind Hollywood's golden facade. Before we begin this intimate journey, honor this legend with a red heart in the comments. Let's celebrate the man who gave us everything, yet carried secrets that would break most hearts. 1. Martha Hart Redford. The foundation that cracked every legend begins with a mother's love, and Martha was Robert's universe. When polio threatened to steal his childhood, her gentle hands and whispered stories became his lifeline. She was warmth incarnate, the voice that chased away nightmares and the smile that made everything possible. But fate is cruel. At just 18, Robert stood at her grave, watching dirt cover the woman who'd given him life. She never saw him take his first bow, never witnessed his Oscar win, never knew her fragile boy would become Hollywood royalty. "Losing my mother changed everything," he later confessed. "It left me with a silence I could never fill." That void followed him through every triumph. Each standing ovation echoed with her absence. Every success whispered the same heartbreak. If only she could see me now. 2. Lola Van Wagnan, the anchor in the storm. Before the world knew Robert Redford, there was just Bob, a broken 22-year-old drowning in grief and reckless living. Into that chaos walked Lola Van Wagnan, a quiet historian who saw not a future movie star, but a wounded soul needing salvation. Their 1958 wedding was humble. Borrowed furniture, threadbare budgets, and fierce hope. In second-hand cribs and worn-out kitchens, they built something precious, a sanctuary where love was their only wealth. But storms always come. Fame struck like lightning, dragging him across continents while Lola became the silent guardian of their family. She bore bedtime stories alone, dried tears without him, shielded their children from fame's glare. Then came the losses that break souls. Scott, their first son, lived only weeks. Years later, James battled fragile health through countless surgeries until cancer claimed him at 58. For nearly 3 decades, Lola carried these griefs with quiet grace. But even the strongest hearts eventually crack. They divorced in 1985, not from betrayal but from exhaustion. 2 warriors who'd fought too many battles together. "Without her, I might have been lost," Redford admitted years later. "And I mean lost in every way a man can be." 3. Natalie Wood, the light that vanished. If Lola was his anchor, Natalie Wood was his ghost. They met in the early 1960s. He the unproven pretty boy, she the weary princess of Hollywood. On Inside Daisy Clover, and This Property is Condemned, their chemistry burned through celluloid. But off-screen, they were simply 2 fragile souls finding solace in shared understanding. Natalie carried light, but you could feel the shadow behind it. She was resilient yet vulnerable, mythic yet achingly human. Then came November 29th, 1981. Natalie Wood, just 43, vanished into the black waters off Catalina Island. Her death wrapped itself in mystery and whispers that never found resolution. When the news reached Redford, it shattered something inside him. The laugh that had steadied him through uncertain years. Gone. The friend who reminded him he was more than his image. Silence forever. He rarely spoke of her death, but when her name surfaced, everything changed. His voice would slow, his gaze would distance, reaching for something too delicate to touch. Natalie became part of his private theater of ghosts, a brightness that vanished too soon, leaving a void louder than any applause. 4. Barbra Streisand, Fire Meets Ice. When fire meets ice, it creates steam. When Barbra Streisand met Robert Redford for The Way We Were in 1973, they created cinema magic that still aches today. She was raw power and unfiltered passion. He was restraint and golden silence. On screen as Katie and Hubble, they embodied love too powerful to survive. A collision of souls destined to touch, ignite, and part. Streisand's intensity pulled vulnerability from Redford that audiences had never seen. She stripped away the myth of the untouchable golden boy and revealed a man capable of breaking, of longing, of losing. The Way We Were became more than a movie. It became a wound, an eternal reminder that some connections exist only in memory, too beautiful for reality, too painful to forget. Barbara called him the Golden Boy, and decades later, that respect never faded. For Redford, she was the embodiment of love that feels eternal yet unattainable, preserved forever on film but unreachable in life. 5. Sonia Braga, The Wildfire. By the late 1980s, Redford had conquered the world but found himself hollow inside. Divorced, haunted by buried children, worn down by fame's weight. Then came Sonia Braga, a Brazilian force of nature who swept through his carefully controlled life like a tornado. Where his existence had been measured and restrained, she was abandonment. Where he carried silence like armor, she wielded passion like fire. The connection was instant, electric, dangerous. For a man in his 50s, she awakened the reckless fever of youth he thought was gone forever. There were nights of intoxicating laughter, heat so sharp it felt dangerous, a love that burned brighter than stadium lights. But wildfire consumes everything, including itself. The very passion that drew them together began to devour what they shared. He longed for stability. She thrived on chaos. What made their union incandescent also made it impossible. When it ended, it wasn't with explosion, but quiet devastation. Redford spoke of her later with awe. She was unforgettable, a force of nature who awakened something in me I might never have known. Sonia Braga was the wildfire that scorched him, left behind an ember that glowed long after the storm had passed. 6. Jane Fonda, The Almost Love. Perhaps the cruelest ache of all is almost love, and Jane Fonda was exactly that for Robert Redford. Their connection began in the 1960s, two outsiders carving space in an industry designed to crush nonconformists. From Barefoot in the Park, to The Electric Horseman, to their final reunion in Our Souls at Night, something electric always crackled between them. Not scandal, not passion, but something quieter and rarer. Intimacy without claim. Jane's sharp courage loosened Robert's guardedness. His steadiness gave her shelter. They built a trust so unshakable it frightened him, because he knew how fragile such bonds could be once tested by desire. In Our Souls at Night, their final screen pairing, the camera caught what no director could stage. Two people carrying 50 years of what if in their eyes. It wasn't acting, it was memory, longing, and resignation captured forever. Jane later admitted she sometimes wished they had been more. Redford never confirmed it, but his silences were louder than words. He feared that one wrong step could destroy the rare bond they shared. For Robert Redford, Jane Fonda was the gentle shadow trailing behind his triumphs, the unanswered question in his twilight, the almost love that lingered for a lifetime. 7. Sibylle Szaggars, The Healing Rain. By the late 1990s, Robert Redford was no longer Hollywood's golden boy, but a man scarred by loss, wearied by applause that no longer comforted. Into that silence came Sibylle Szaggars, a German-born artist whose world was shaped by paint and light, not film and fame. She wasn't dazzled by his legend, nor did she seek its glow. She arrived with her own brilliance, canvases that breathed with storms, colors that whispered of the natural world. Where others had been fire, she was calm water. Where others had demanded, she offered space. Meeting her was like stepping into a meadow after decades lost in tangled forests. For the first time in years, he could simply be Bob. In Santa Fe and Sundance, they built sanctuaries of simplicity, studios filled with Sibylle's art, evenings softened by music, silences that felt like prayer. When they married in 2009, he described it in disarmingly plain words. It feels like a new life. Together they created The Way of the Rain, a union of her vision and his voice. On stage, speaking over her imagery of water and sky, Redford wasn't performing, but confessing, bearing the truth of a soul that had finally found refuge. Sibylle Szaggars was not the anchor of his beginning, nor the spark of youthful longing. She was something rarer, the healing rain at the end of a long road, the final companion who gave him the gentleness he'd been denied. With her, love was no longer a wildfire to survive, but a shelter to inhabit. Not fevered longing, but quiet fulfillment. Not survival, but completion. On September 16, 2025, in the stillness of their Sundance home, Robert Redford drew his final breath. Beside him sat Sibylle, her hand locked around his, clinging as though her grip alone could hold back the inevitable. He left behind an estimated $200 million fortune, sprawling Utah acres, the Santa Fe retreat, decades of artistic success. But his truest wealth was never in dollars. It was in the bonds that shaped the man behind the myth. 7 women, 7 chapters, 7 different kinds of love that carved themselves into his soul. Martha, the foundation stolen too soon. Lola, the anchor who saved him from drowning Natalie. The light that vanished into mystery Barbara. The fire that revealed his vulnerability Sonia. The wildfire that awakened his passion Jane. The almost love that lingered forever Sibylle. The healing rain that gave him peace. What Robert Redford leaves behind is more than an estate to be divided. It's a testament that greatness isn't applause or fame or wealth. It's the ability to love deeply, even when that love costs you everything. If his story has touched your heart, if his courage has inspired you, leave a red heart below. Share a memory of how his films moved you. Let's honor a man who gave us everything while carrying storms we never knew existed. May Robert Redford, who bore so many secrets with such grace, now rest in the peace he so profoundly earned.